Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for their patience. Very much appreciated. Welcome to the Capital Budget Subcommittee. There's several other hearings going on this afternoon. It's a little bit of delay, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first presentation we'll hear is Morgan State University, and our budget analyst is Kelly Norton.
Thank you. We're going to begin with page 1. Morgan State University has 8 projects in the 2025 capital improvement program. 4 of these projects will receive $37.7 million in general obligation bond funding in fiscal 2025. Those projects are the new Science Center Phase 2, Campus Expansion Phase 1 at Lake Clifton, the Deferred Maintenance and Site Improvements Program, and the Carter Grant Wilson Building Renovation. The summary of the fiscal 2025 funded state-owned projects begin on page 3. The first project is the new Science Center Phase 2 project. The new building will house the biology and chemistry departments in the Dean's Office of the School of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences. DBM estimates the total cost of the project at $264.3 million, and the CIP has request for fiscal 2025 of $22.9 million in gold bonds for Morgan. Officials contend that the project will actually cost $342 million due to inflation, supply chain difficulties, the underestimating of initial costs, and the discovery of a large water tunnel underneath the construction site. DLS asked the president to comment on the discrepancy in the cost estimates and plans to deal with this nearly $80 million difference. The Campus Expansion Phase 1 Lake Clifton High School demolition project is found on page 5. The current building is being demolished, and the university will create a redevelopment plan for the site. $5.3 million in gold bond funding is scheduled for fiscal 2025 with a total cost of $15.5 million and expected to be completed in December 2025. Morgan was to submit a JCR report on the redevelopment of Lake Clifton. It was not submitted at the time of the writing of the analysis, but has since been submitted. The Deferred Maintenance and Site Improvements Program starts on page 6. Morgan has identified a backlog of roughly $200 million in deferred maintenance expenses, which this program is meant to address. And while no out-year funding is shown in the CIP, this is considered to be an annual program. The CIP includes $5 million in gold bonds for fiscal 2025. This funding includes $2.9 million for 2 projects: repairs of concrete, Y stairs, and handrail, and the replacement of the roof and exterior doors at the Murphy Fine Arts Center. The remaining $2.1 million is for funding overages of previously approved or funded deferred maintenance projects. DLS has concerns regarding the $30 million Morgan received in fiscal 2023 for the deferred maintenance and site improvements. Only $4.4 million of that funding has been encumbered to date. DLS asked the president to comment on the status of the other fiscal 2023 deferred maintenance projects and the anticipated timeline for encumbering and expending the $30 million provided in fiscal 2023. The Carter Grant Wilson Building Renovation Project begins on page 8. The renovation will address insufficient space and inoperable and failing building systems. In total, the project is estimated to cost $36.7 million, an increase of $2.1 million from last year's CIP due to cost escalation and delays. The CIP has a request this year of $4.4 million in gold bonds. The summary of the out-year projects are on pages 9 through 10. The 4 projects are campus-wide electrical infrastructure upgrades, campus renovations, the Jenkins demolition, and the Dixon Research Center renovation expansion. The recommended actions are found on page 2. DLS recommends approving all authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations. That concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Norton. Are there any questions for the budget analyst? Great. This afternoon, we have joining us from Morgan State University, Dr. David Wilson, president, and also Elias Lachina. They could both come up. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And please get started.
Thank you very much, Chair Chang and members of the committee. We thank Governor Westmore and the committee for your continued strong support of Morgan State University. I have with me several of my colleagues, as you noted. To my left, Kim McCalla, our Vice President for Facilities, Design, and Construction. To my right, David Lachina, our Executive Vice President. And of course, to my far right, former State Senator Joan Carter Conway. I will be very cognizant of the time and just make a few comments. Of course, we have submitted our written testimony to you. The comments are really designed around the incredible transformation of Morgan State University. I think that is rooted in the kind of investments that the state has made in addressing some of our really pent-up capital needs at the university. We have historic enrollments in the 157-year history of the institution. About 10,000 students now coming from 45 states and 70 plus countries. This past year, as it was last year, about 40% of our students, an increase of 40% of our students coming from the state of Maryland. But those investments in our capital facilities, they really have led to some incredible growth at the university on the research side. Morgan is ascending quite rapidly in the research space. We expect within the next 3 years to join the University of Maryland College Park and UMBC as the third public, very high R1 research institution in the state of Maryland. We were fortunate last year to have brought in nearly $82 million in federal grants and contracts, coupled with a $27 million IDIQ from NIST, bringing our total last year to over $115 million. We are on track this year to also realize more than $100 million in federal grants and contracts. And so we really appreciate the investments that are being made. And you can see here in our testimony that we give you a sample of some of the facilities that we brought online. That coupled with some unique high demand academic degree programs that we have instituted at Morgan. We think that's one of the reasons why the enrollment has really just really increased so rapidly. We cannot house or accept any more students at this point until we catch up with the demand for the Morgan degree. And so with that said, you asked me to comment on a number of things. And so in doing that, I want to first turn to Kim McCalla. And let me say this about Kim McCalla. Kim McCalla has been with us at Morgan for about 15 years. She preceded me by a year or two in my 14th year. She came from the Maryland Stadium Authority. And Mr. Chair, all of the facilities that have been erected over the last 14, 15 years, all of the renovations at Morgan have occurred under the watchful eye and adroit leadership of Kim McCalla. Every single project that we have come to this legislature and have asked to support, Kim McCalla has brought that project in on time and under budget. However, this first project is one that we have tried mightily to bring it in really at the level that, well, the state had not given us the authorization, but we have been back and forth with DBM indicating that we had engineered out of the project everything that we could. This is our new science building. The current science building at Morgan is not really as good as the worst high school in the state's building. And so this building is projected to have an investment of about $340+ million. It was up to 354. We have engineered everything that we can out of this building. The state has included in the CIP a total cost of about $254 million, which is about $80 million short. And so I'm going to turn to Kim McCalla and ask her just to summarize, if you will, what it is that we have done to try and address this. But the bottom line is that if we go forward and we build this building at the $250+ million investment level, we would have to have about just 160,000 square feet or so of the building that would just simply be shell space. Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, and members of the committee and the chair. This has been stressful for staff and myself for being this far over budget, but times are really different than what we have had in the past, and costs are coming in higher. In addition to the science program just has high equipment needs, which are very expensive, and also trying to make the building reach the R1, to help us reach the R1 status for our research. We also have to duplicate many of the systems in the building, particularly on the electrical and mechanical sides, to ensure the proper operation of the building. We continue to work to see what we can pull out of the project and reduce the square footage and simplify the looks of the building in order to reduce the cost of the project. We have pulled out 10 million so far, and we're still trying to pull out additional funds without jeopardizing the program. If we start pulling out, as Dr. Wilson said, or shelling out space, we will basically be eliminating either the biology or the chemistry departments, which will affect the accreditation, the future accreditation of the science project. Science is growing by leaps and bounds and just doesn't serve the students that are going through the math and science programs, but serves every student on the campus that comes through as general education programs. So we are hopefully in the future years of the development of the project that we can secure additional funds for this project, and we will continue to do our best to bring the costs down.
Over the last 6 years, our biology majors at Morgan have increased 100 or so percent. We have over 600 kids at Morgan who are majoring in biology, pre-med, biochemistry. We have another 75 that are double majors. We have 60 PhD students in biomedical sciences, and basically all 8,000 of our undergraduates, they must take chemistry and biology before they graduate. So this building is so critical as we seek to continue to educate a diverse workforce for the state of Maryland in the critical STEM fields. You also asked us to comment on where we are in developing the master plan for the recently acquired Lake Clifton property. That's 59 acres. It's the largest acquisition of real property in the 157-year history of Morgan. The 59 acres actually represent about 35% of the existing land space that now occupies the university. And so, Kim, can you briefly let us know where we are with that?
Sure. So we are currently interviewing architects for the main campus master plan. As a part of that, part of the main campus master plan, we will be working with staff to determine what programs will best be relocated down at the Clifton property in order to either free up space on campus or allow those programs to grow in addition to where they are on campus, in addition to looking at other development. Once we have the idea of what wants to be down at the Clifton site, we are also in the process of starting to write the RFPs for a development consultant and a development master plan also for the site where we're moving forward. We will beginning, we have going out to bid the demolition for the site to clear the site in preparation for this new development. So and we're working very closely with City of Baltimore, Housing Commissioner, and the city itself and the local communities to help them understand what development wants to happen around the site. So we're working cohesively with them also to ensure that we are also benefiting the community and us as we bring and elevate the community along with Morgan.
And last, you've asked us the status of encumbering and expending the $30 million in deferred maintenance.
Thank you. Out to bid as we speak is the slope stabilization project. It's taken us a little bit of time to advertise the project because we were trying to seek federal funds to help with the costs. That has not turned out to fruition. So we've moved forward with the project. We're waiting for those bids to come in, but we're expecting that to be anywhere between $10 and $15 million project because it's just on an unstable area. So once I know what those costs are going to be, then we will release other projects that we have stated here. One is renovating the boilers in the heating plant, upgrading our fire alarm service, and we're replacing the chapel roof and a few other projects that we have lined up and ready to go.
And with regard to recommended actions, Mr. Chair, Morgan State University concurs with the governor's budget. And that is our report.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Are there any questions for Morgan State University? Great. Thank you very much. Great to see you. That concludes the hearing for Morgan State University Committee. We'll now move on to Historic St. Mary's City Commission, and the budget analyst is Jacob Polakov.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, Jacob Polakov for the Historic St. Mary's City Commission Capital Analysis. Historic St. Mary's City has 4 projects in the capital improvement program this year. The first is a site improvements project. Then we have the Leonard Calvert House exhibit, the new collection storage maintenance facility, and the Education Center and Artisan Center renovation and systems upgrade. One of those projects, the site improvements, receives funding in fiscal 2025. We have changing priorities for the fiscal 2025 funding. The fiscal 2025 capital budget includes $2 million for site improvements compared to $1 million, which was planned for fiscal 25 in last year's capital improvement program. The Education Center and Artisan Center project was programmed to receive $1 million in fiscal 2025 in last year's capital improvement program. However, this year's program postpones the initial funding for this project to fiscal 2026 as a result of changing priorities for Historic St. Mary's. DLS has one recommended action, which is to adopt narrative regarding encumbrances and expenditures, a report regarding encumbrances and expenditures, rather. The budget committees have previously requested updates regarding annual project encumbrances and expenditures for the site improvements project at Historic St. Mary's. This committee narrative requests that the Historic St. Mary's City Commission submit a report by December 1st of this year, detailing year-to-date encumbrances and expenditures for all site improvement projects. The report should also include the priority level of each project and any changes in timelines, designs, or priorities within the project. The site improvements project, which is funded in fiscal 2025, is designed to address problems which have been identified related to aging and lacking infrastructure across Historic St. Mary's City. HSMCC has reported encumbering only $48,000 of the $5 million, which has been authorized thus far. Therefore, they should comment on the reasons for the low encumbrances to date and what they're doing to ensure that sufficient progress is made on site improvement projects. There are also concerns regarding the 2023 Joint Chairman's Report, which requested a report providing updated information on the use of funding and updates on individual site improvement projects. HSMCC did not submit a response to that request. However, the agency did provide updates to the Department of Legislative Services in October of 2023. And in order to ensure continued oversight of these projects, DLS recommends the adoption of the narrative, which I discussed a moment ago. There are the 3 other projects which are programmed in the out years, and those are all detailed in the CIP with their various total estimated costs and what they will be doing in future years. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Polakov. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Polakov on the analysis? This afternoon, we have from Historic St. Mary's City Commission, Dr. John Seidels, Executive Director. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here. We appreciate your support and that of the Moore Miller administration. I am new on the job, just 2 months in, so I have backup with me. I've got retired Admiral Tim Healy, who is the chair of the commission, to my right, CFO Doug Hunter to his right, and on my left is Dr. Travis Parno, who did a remarkable job as acting director for about 9 months. And then we also have facilities director Joe Kangas and also our COO. You have my written testimony, so I will summarize and keep it brief. First, we concur with the governor's budget and the analyst's recommendations, both on the capital budget and also on the observations and recommendations. Mr. Polakov has been a pleasure to work with, and he's both thorough and on target. He correctly observed that there's been a significant lag in encumbering capital funds, and this has been of great concern to the Historic St. Mary's City staff even before my arrival. I'm really pleased to tell you, however, that there's been a significant jump in encumbrances just in the past 60 days. Instead of the $48,000 encumbered at the time that our data were submitted, we're now at over 2.8 million encumbered. That's a 60-fold increase, and other projects are moving very, very quickly. We'll continue to see outstanding projects move into solicitation, followed by contracts, and then as construction gets underway. So in my written testimony, I've explained some of the reasons for the previous delays, and I'm happy to address those further if you wish, but feel that we've made a lot of progress in trying to resolve some of those hurdles. We feel very good about the future. DGS has been extremely helpful, and equally essential has been the guidance of DBM. And I think with their input, we've managed to resolve much of this. I really do, though, want to underscore the critical need for the capital improvements in this budget and those that are in the pipeline. The museum's infrastructure is aging. Deferred maintenance is one of my top priorities. And I think the upkeep is a challenge that's not recognized by everybody. Historic St. Mary's City is much bigger than most people recognize. It's not a single museum, but rather it is 835 acres with 2.5 miles of river frontage. We have over 100 buildings, which include reconstructions such as the 1676 State House, the chapel, Farthing's Ordinary Complex. We have museum installations and exhibitions such as the St. John site and a new planned Maryland Heritage Interpretive Center that's going up as we speak. We have a farm, we have a reconstructed historic vessel in the Dove, and all of that takes an enormous amount of upkeep. And I want to emphasize that upgrades are all the more important because of the looming 400th anniversary of Maryland's birth. That is coming to us in 2034, and we believe that that anniversary can generate significant economic growth in the surrounding area through heritage tourism, and it makes the capital improvements all the more valuable. So we want to be prepared, and we're doing everything we can to do so. Now, having said that, it may seem that 10 years from now is a long ways out. But from a planning perspective, and certainly in terms of the necessary infrastructural development, it's critical that we begin that now. We owe it to the state and our varied constituents to capitalize on this rare opportunity and to make the most of it. And that's going to require investments of time and both private and state funding, but the opportunities and the potential are profound. So we're tremendously excited over this potential. We're grateful for your support. And on behalf of our staff and the approximately 60,000 citizens who visit us each year, thank you. We're very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Seidel. Are there any questions from the committee for Dr. Seidel? Great. Thank you very much. Then it concludes the hearing for Historic St. Mary's City Commission. The subcommittee will now move on to Judiciary, and our budget analyst is Jacob Polikoff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, Jacob Polikoff for the Department of Legislative Services for the Judiciary's capital budget analysis. The 2024 capital improvement program includes 5 projects for the judiciary. The first being the new Supreme Court of Maryland building, the second being a conversion of the Shulman building, the third being a new Anne Arundel County District Court in Glen Burnie, the fourth being a new Harford County District Court, and the fifth being the Washington County District Court renovation and expansion. 2 of these projects, the new Supreme Court of Maryland building and the Shulman building conversion, received funding in fiscal 2025. The judiciary has also completed work on is working on a capital master plan, which has indicated a need for future projects. They're in the process of completing that master plan to track the status of all current planned and potential capital projects, which we'll discuss more in a moment. The GeoBond recommended actions are to approve all authorizations and pre-authorizations for the judiciary. On page 3 of the analysis, we'll see a discussion of the Shulman building conversion. The project involves significant changes to the Shulman building in Baltimore City, which is being converted to a courthouse. The primary focus is on renovating the building to provide space for a total of 7 courtrooms, along with modern safety standards and resolutions to maintenance problems. The existing facility cannot handle additional cases due to a lack of space for additional courtrooms and a configuration that lacks security features, which would allow criminal cases to be heard at the facility. The current facility doesn't have private hallways or parking for judges and requires judges to utilize non-secure public spaces to move throughout the courthouse, including between chambers and courtrooms. Additionally, the facility suffers, from maintenance-related issues, including water intrusion, HVAC deficiencies, and aging interior infrastructure, and is not in compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act standards. The project has been subject to numerous delays in past years. However, it is presently 6 months ahead of the current schedule, or rather the schedule anticipated last session, with an expected completion date of March of 2025. This clause funding originally planned for fiscal 2026 to be requested for fiscal 2025. Moving to page 4, we'll see that the new Supreme Court of Maryland building, which will house the Supreme Court, the Appellate Court of Maryland, the Thurgood Marshall State Law Library, and other judiciary units, is replacing a facility constructed in 1972, which has functionally obsolete systems, structural issues, and insufficient space for the current needs of units housed in the facility. Additionally, the current building does not meet ADA requirements and does not have an effective layout for security. The project name was changed, as you may have noted previously, as the new Courts of Appeal building to reflect the name change for the Supreme Court of Maryland, which took effect last year. The previously noted delay in beginning construction on this project resulted in the recommended GEO bond funding in fiscal 2025 decreasing from the planned amount last year of $64.4 million to $35.4 million. The additional funds will be needed in future years as the project has not seen a decrease in estimated overall cost, and the capital budget bill pre-authorizes $71.8 million for fiscal 2026 and $23.9 million for fiscal 2027. The total project cost in the 2024 CIP is $193 million, which is an increase of about $3.5 million from last year's CIP. This increase is reflective of the delay in the project, as well as some small changes which were made. On page 5, we have a summary of the out-year state-owned projects, which include the new Anne Arundel County District Court in Glen Burnie and the new Harford County District Court. There's also the Washington County District Court renovation and expansion, which involves the renovation of the existing courthouse in Hagerstown, as well as the construction of an addition. The judiciary should comment on when a new architect is expected to be hired for this project, and if the current projected completion date of April 2026 is still possible, given the complications in the design process. On page 6, we'll see that the judiciary is in the process of creating a master plan to track the status of all current, planned, and potential capital projects, as well as capital needs within all judiciary facilities. As part of the process, the judiciary has identified multiple district court facilities that are in need of replacement for different reasons. Some courthouses serve areas where the judiciary has certified a need for additional judgeships, but is unable to create new judgeships due to space constraints. Others have a variety of facility problems. The CIP currently has 5 projects programmed for judiciary facilities. 4 of these are current projects, while the new facility in Glen Burnie is classified as a planned project in this exhibit 1 seen on page 6. The judiciary has also identified the Essex Courthouse in Baltimore County as being in need of replacement. A desirable site for a new facility has been identified for the Essex project, but the site is not yet available. Exhibit 1 shows the projects I've mentioned, as well as 2 other projects that the judiciary has identified as facilities in need of replacement, but which have not yet been added to the CIP. The judiciary should comment on the anticipated timeline for adding projects or replacing leased facilities in Baltimore, Frederick, and Garrett counties to the CIP, and if any of these facilities has a more urgent need than the other noted potential project sites. The judiciary should also comment on the anticipated timeline for completion of the master plan. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Pellico, for the presentation. Are there any questions for the budget analyst? Great. Thank you very much. This afternoon, we have from the judiciary, Matthew J. Fader, Chief Justice, and also Chief Judge John Morrissey and Ms. Judy Rupp. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Chairman Chang, Vice Chairman Lewis, members of the committee. We are very appreciative of your consideration and support for our capital budget, and always appreciative of Mr. Polikov's very thorough analysis. We do agree with the recommended actions and have submitted written responses as requested, and are happy to answer any further questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chief Judge. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee or your judiciary? Great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing for judiciary. The committee will now move on to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. And our budget analyst is Mr. Jacob Cash.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jacob Cash. I'm a policy analyst for the Department of Legislative Services, and today I'll be discussing the budget and recommendations for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. If you join me on the cover page, you can see the summary of project funding for each of the 6 projects currently included in this year's capital improvement program. Funding for the 3 projects already funded is $94.8 million in previously authorized funds. The amount requested in fiscal 2025 for those three projects is $23.2 million, and the total amount funding needed from fiscal 2025 and beyond is $1 billion for those three projects. In addition, there are three other projects that have not yet received funding and are not expected to receive funding until fiscal 2027 at the earliest. And these three projects are anticipated to need $330 million in total funding. That's primarily driven by the Jessup Regional Infirmary. On page 2, there's a bar chart that shows the funding breakdown each year for all DPSCS capital projects as they currently stand. Fiscals 2027 and 2028 are expected to rise to over 10% of the total state capital budget at approximately $312 and $331 million, respectively. That's primarily due to the Baltimore Therapeutic Treatment Center and the construction stage. There's been some significant changes to the capital program for public safety as summarized on page 2 and page 3. Costs have risen across the board and even more projects have been taken off the table. The rising costs are driven by more accurate estimates from the design team for the Therapeutic Treatment Center, as well as other across-the-board increases adjusting to inflation and the current construction economy, specifically for high-security buildings and secure medical complexes. The Therapeutic Treatment Center alone is expected to cost nearly $1 billion in total, and the department has been working with DBM to make some difficult decisions on deferring less critical projects, such as an MCE textiles and graphics shop, perimeter security upgrades, and separate regional ADA housing units that have been condensed into the Jessup Regional Infirmary project. The department also decided against replacing the MRDCC facade, which is failing and crumbling, in lieu of demolishing the building because of the high costs of just replacing that facade. At the same time, the bed count estimate for the Therapeutic Treatment Center was reduced by canceling the phase 2 of that project. So overall, we're seeing some reductions in bed space estimates in the future for the Baltimore pretrial complex. That brings up concerns for possible overcrowding. And Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows the current population trends for the department. And there's been an increase in the most recent year, and that raises DLS's concern for future overcrowding if the new Therapeutic Treatment Center fails to replace more beds than are demolished at the MRDCC, which is the current plan. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows the population specific to Baltimore City facilities, which are more acutely impacted by that potential overcrowding. While the total number of individuals in DPSCS custody decreased for these facilities, the number of federal detainees at CDF were driving that decrease, and they're expected to increase in the future as per departmental testimony. Additionally, the number of sentenced offenders has increased since the lows of the pandemic, and the increase in arrests bring more light to that trend. The first project I'd like to dive into today is the Women's Pre-Release Center, now known as the Life Skills and Reentry Center for Women, or LSRCW, which begins on page 8 of the analysis. The LSRCW is expected to consist of a 4-unit, 64-bed housing facility of 51,400 net square feet or 61,700 gross square feet. It'll serve as the only standalone pre-release facility for women in the state as required by Chapter 16 of 2021, the Gender Responsive Pre-Release Act. The project is anticipated to need $9 million total dollars in funding for planning. $5 million has already been provided. The preliminary construction cost estimates indicate the project will need approximately $89 million in total funding, although these may be outdated and in need of further refinement. The project schedule has unfortunately reached another point of delay as the previously approved program part 1 and 2 were modified as a result of a location change. The location was previously expected to demolish a former public school in Baltimore City, and it was far away from the department's headquarters in Reisterstown and far away from the pretrial complex in the Penn Fallway neighborhood. There was also concern not only about the distance, but about building a correctional facility near a community accustomed to a school for young children. Exhibit 5 shows the new location, which is currently a parking lot owned by DPSCS directly next to the detention facilities. This location is right next to the planned construction site for the Therapeutic Treatment Center, so that does bring up some concerns with space management if they're both to be built simultaneously. The program modification is currently under review by GBM, and the project is delayed until those concerns and questions have been resolved. And there could be more revisions to the program plan to keep it within the approved scope and while satisfying all requirements of the law. For this project, DLS is recommending to reduce funds by $2 million in fiscal 2025 due to the delay and to pre-authorize those funds for fiscal 2026 to complete the construction or to complete the design phase. And we note that this funding as currently provided would be enough to carry through the 100% construction document stage. Next, I'll be discussing the Baltimore Therapeutic Treatment Center beginning on page 12. The BTTC will build a 50-bed deflection and day reporting area, as well as an 804-bed treatment-focused detention facility for men and women. While the project was previously anticipated to have 2 phases, totaling $1.5 billion, the project has been downsized to make it more manageable for state finances at just under $1 billion. The project is still anticipated to be the single most expensive state-owned project in Maryland history, capital project in Maryland history. This will replace the demolished Baltimore City Detention Center and allow for enough room to demolish the crumbling MRDCC. The project is intended to not only create bed space, but revolutionize the delivery of services to the pretrial population through thoughtful state-of-the-art design principles. And I would note that the current complex is under a consent decree for poor delivery of services, and DLS is asking the department to comment on how the revised project will still meet the needs of that consent decree with a reduced bed count. There's 2 vendors leading the project, and the Department of General Services is the state representative. CGL Companies has an approved $16 million design and construction management contract, and STV has an approved $34 million design and schematics contract. There's additional contingencies in the design budget of approximately $8 million if needed to increase those. The changes to the project since last session are shown in Exhibit 6 on page 14. The cost estimate increased by $443 million, and the completion date was pushed back by 9 months. These estimates have been provided by the vendors, and they're much more accurate than previous numbers. And Exhibit 7 on page 15 breaks down where most of the change is coming from for that overall increase. The increase in cost per square foot is the main driver, and that estimate was increased because there's more accurate comparison facilities now that they have been researching as part of that vendor contract. There's also an increase in the overall area expected because there was more support space needed for food, laundry, and warehouse. I would be remiss if I did not mention the operating costs for this facility once they open, which could be as early as fiscal 2030, are expected to be over $100 million, and that will have a significant impact on the general fund. And while there may be some decreases when the MRDCC is demolished, we need more information on how program operations will be fully fleshed out to understand the state commitment. DLS also lists some concerns with deferred projects on page 16 and 17 related to increased funding needed for the regional infirmary and potential safety consequences of deferring perimeter security projects. The recommended actions for this budget are listed on page 3 and 4 and were previously mentioned related to shifting $2 million in funding for the LSRCW from fiscal 2025 to 2026. With that, my presentation is concluded, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Cash, for the presentation. Are there any questions from the subcommittee for Mr. Cash? Great. Thank you very much. This afternoon, we have joining us the Secretary of the Public Safety and Correctional Services, Secretary Scruggs. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Chang, members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today are Deputy Secretary of Operations, Annie Harvey, our new, not yet a week in office, Director of Capital Construction, Mr. John Sarakowski, Assistant Director of Capital Construction, John Gauthier, and Deputy Director, James Dunkerson. The department appreciates its ongoing collaboration with DLS, as well as Mr. Cash's hard work and thoughtful analysis. The analysis contains 4 issues and 2 recommended actions. Regarding the first issue, we have been asked to respond to the status of the design and procurement for the Life Skills and Reentry Center for Women. The project is in the final phase of program development, and once approved by DGS and DBM, a design firm will be selected for the project. The second issue addresses the reasons for funding estimates on the new Jessup Infirmary. The scope of the project has not changed, but costs have increased since our first professional estimate based on inflation and ever-changing material and labor markets. The third issue the department was asked to comment on is the deferral of the perimeter security upgrades. Technology has changed since the original design concept, and microwave technologies have been phased out of the market. We do not want to install obsolete systems. We are evaluating new technology with the installation of new systems at the Eastern Correctional Institution with the high temperature and hot water and perimeter fence project that is currently underway. Any new perimeter security upgrades will be submitted with consideration for new technology. The last issue we are asked to comment on was the reduced bed count at BTTC and how that would enable us to comply with Duval. The current design will satisfy the compliance requirements of addictions, medical, and mental health. DLS has recommended that GO bond authorization and pre-authorization be reduced for the Life Skills and Reentry Center for Women. I respectfully request that the committee maintain the funding that was recommended by the governor's proposed budget. And we're happy to answer any questions for you.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Are there any questions from the members of the subcommittee for Madam Secretary? Okay, great, thank you very much. And then we have a few witnesses who are signed up. And we have Denise Gilmore with AFSCME Maryland, and then also Beth Tomasello with the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club. Should come up, and then we'll have one more come up. Evelyn Burton with Schizophrenia Psychosis Action Alliance. We could have Ms. Gilmore go first, Ms. Tomasello go second, and then Ms. Burton go third. It's Evelyn Burton. Is Evelyn Burton here? See her. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gilmore.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Denise Gilmore. I'm the legislative director with AFSCME Maryland. We represent the staff who work in the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Really just wanted to talk about 2 projects in the budget. One is the Baltimore Therapeutic Treatment Center. Our members continue to be very concerned that this is a very expensive state project that is being built, that at this point it's still very unclear the extent to which it's even going to be public employees that are ultimately going to be working there once it's complete. As folks know, currently all the prison medical is happening through a vendor, through a private contract. So it certainly is possible that we're spending almost $1 billion on state facility using state funds only to have the private sector run it, which concerns us. I'll testify on the health department budget in a minute, but there's also just our corrections members didn't exactly enter this line of work with the intention of being a treatment agency. We also have some questions about this project being planned under DPSCS to begin with. We also want to continue to encourage the building of the Women's Pre-Release Center. That we've always been happy to support that, and it's important to our officers in terms of safety. The current location is actually a parking lot that our correctional officers are using. So that naturally provides some questions on what happens, just from a very practical standpoint, on where that building design is. So, we would encourage, certainly continuing to build this, but maybe looking at a spot that isn't taking away from parking. Thank you.
Chair Chang and members of the subcommittee, my name is Beth Tomasello, past president of the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club. WDC has worked in support of the Women's Pre-Release Equity Coalition since 2019. As you know, DPSCS has proposed locating the Women's Pre-Release Center at 717 Forest Street in Baltimore. Last week, I visited the site in person, and while we appreciate that DPSCS has finally committed to fund the LSCRW, if it is built on this site, we believe the department will be making an $88 million mistake. The site is located adjacent to the Baltimore Pretrial and Detention Complex, which includes 6 DPSCS facilities. Much of the neighborhood consists of derelict, graffiti-covered garbage-strewn industrial buildings. The site is adjacent to the Latrobe homes and is 1 block from a large strip club called the Penthouse Club. As I was taking photos of the site, off-duty veteran corrections officers approached me. I told them that DPSCS planned to put the LSCRW on the site. They immediately expressed strong opposition. First, they said the site is too small, requiring the entrance to be directly on the street rather than set back, which would not be safe for the staff or the women. They also objected that the small size would not provide needed green space for the residents. They described the immediate area as drug infested, and with the proximity of the Latrobe home, said they believed that the drugs could easily be brought into the facility under the guise of family visits. In summary, they felt the site is not safe or appropriate for women or legitimate family visitation. The officers said that in their view, locating the facility at 717 Forest Street would preordain the women's failure in the program, for which the women themselves would be blamed. These officers could not testify before the subcommittee for fear of losing their jobs, but they encouraged me to provide you with their views. I hope you will visit 717 Forest Street yourselves. And if you do, please think about whether you would want your sister to live there if she made a mistake and was trying to put her life back together. For the reasons outlined in our written testimony and stated by the corrections officers, we believe that the LSCRW does not belong at 717 Forest Street. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's from members of the committee for these 2 witnesses. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And just one last time, just checking Evelyn Burton with the Schizophrenia Psychosis Action Alliance. Okay, thank you very much. Next, that concludes the hearing for Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. The committee will now move on to local jails and detention centers presented by Jacob Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Jacob Cash. I'm a policy analyst for the Department of Legislative Services, and today I'll be discussing the budget and recommendations for the local jails and detention centers capital grant program, which is administered by the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. The program provides matching state funds for building new or expanded local detention centers across the state. If you join me on the cover page, you can see that the fiscal 2025 request for funds is $1.9 million for planning 1 project in Montgomery County. 1 project was canceled in Queen Anne's County, and those funds are deauthorized in fiscal 2024. Moving to page 4, Exhibit 1 shows the overall trends in local jail populations since fiscal 2011. Levels are currently on the rise, but are similar to the pre-pandemic levels in fiscals 2017 and 2018. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows that 13 of 23 counties saw population increases in the past year, led by Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore County, and Frederick counties. On the other hand, 9 counties had decreases. Cecil County had the largest reduction in population in fiscal 2023 and is no longer operating above capacity, which is a good thing. Carroll County had another year of increases, and they are currently at a recent historical peak. DLS recommends repeating the budget narrative that requests this annual data submission. On page 7, Exhibit 3 breaks down the anticipated funding summary for the 1 project being funded. State matching funds have already been provided in fiscal 2024, and the 2025 request will continue planning as the preparation and bidding process moves on. More funding will be needed to complete planning, and the total amount of funding for the total project is $40.8 million by conclusion. This project will replace the existing Montgomery County Detention Center with a new facility focused on improving core detention processes, addressing gaps in service, and expanding their deflection and diversion programming. The master facilities confinement study that the county completed in 2014 concluded that that replacement would be more cost effective than renovations that are necessary, particularly related to medical and programming space. However, since that was completed in 2014, DLS is asking the department to comment on the progress in updating the master's facility confinement study for Montgomery County and any anticipated impact that might have on this project's scope, size, and operational needs. On page 8, I'd like to summarize 2 previously funded projects. The first was a medical addition completed in Frederick County. State funding totaled $7.7 million through fiscal 2024, but DPSES indicated the project closed out at approximately $5.4 million in state funding. So DLS is asking the department to provide an update on that final accounting of project funds. Finally, there was a previously funded project planned for new detention center buildings and renovations for Queen Anne's County. That project has been canceled despite previously being ready to start construction. The previously authorized state funds are deauthorized in the new capital budget, and the county is responsible for covering the already expended funding. The project was pulled by the county in favor of a regional detention center in collaboration with Kent and Caroline counties, all of which previously anticipated needing millions of state dollars for construction and renovation projects, particularly for adding medical space and bringing the facilities into federal compliance. It's not clear how much this new facility will cost, but it is expected to be more expensive than the canceled Queen Anne's County project, even though it will be expected to take advantage of efficiencies between the 3 counties. The recommended actions for this budget can be found on page 2, which are to approve of the GO bond funding and request submission of annual population statistics. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Cash, for the presentation. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Mr. Cash on the analysis? Okay, great. Thank you very much. This afternoon, we have Secretary of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Secretary Scruggs, and her team. Okay, thank you very much for being here.
Good afternoon, Secretary Chang and members of the committee. Chair Chang and members of the subcommittee. My name is James Dunkerson, Deputy Director for the Division of Capital Construction and Facilities Maintenance for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me is our new director, John Sierakowski. We appreciate the members' time and Mr. Cash's efforts on our behalf. Addressing the 2 issues, Montgomery County should comment on the progress of updating their master facilities study. We have Kate Beckley and Ben Foster from Montgomery County with us. They can speak on their behalf.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Ben Stevenson. I'm the Director of the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation in Montgomery County. First, I wanted to thank you, Chair Chang, as well as the subcommittee for the support in this project. I did want to acknowledge whether or not you received a letter explaining some of the questions in our population. Okay. The master confinement study was done in 2014, which was a large-scale project to look at our assessment and needs. Those numbers obviously are not up to date. And most recently, we've used our county stat division within our county to do an analysis. Within our analysis, we looked at it. We came to the conclusion that the numbers needed to be at 103 beds versus 88 to meet the needs. Again, this is a 72-hour intake jail. It's not a long-term jail. So we do expect to bolster a lot of the transportation to our main jail up in MCCF.
In addressing the second issue, My previous copy of the issues did not indicate it was Frederick County that you wanted numbers on, so the response is not appropriate. I did get those numbers. Currently, there is a balance of $148,178 on their second grant. On their third, there is a balance of $1,388,000. They have not yet applied to anything towards the last grant of $1.01 million. In responses, the analysis contains 3 recommended action. The department concurs that the general obligation bond be authorized. The local jails population reports by quarter were attached to our written testimony. There was a mention to deauthorize a canceled project on behalf of Calvert County. There is an issue there. The project that has the $508,000 appropriation in question, that project has not only been undertaken, but is essentially complete. I contacted Major Reese at Calvert County, but they have not yet returned to me with the anticipated date for encumbering those funds. However, there was another project they declined to pursue, the Calvert County site security improvements that was funded for $249,000. That project has been canceled and those funds can be reverted. That concludes our testimony. We're happy to entertain any questions from the committee.
Great. Thank you very much for the responses. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for the panel? Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing for local jails and detention center. The subcommittee will now move on to the Baltimore City Community College, and our budget analyst is Sam Quist.
Thank you, Chairman Chang. The DLS analysis for the Baltimore City Community College. My name is Samuel Quist. The beginning on page number 1 of the analysis, the fiscal 2025 request totals $5.3 million and includes funds for 2 projects, the college's ongoing deferred maintenance program, as well as the nursing building renovation and addition project. On page 2, under the recommended actions, DLS is recommending to approve the general obligation bond authorization for both projects in fiscal 2025. There is a Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act recommended action for BCCC. DLS is recommending to add a provision to the BRFA that would reduce general funds authorized in the fiscal 2022 budget for the demolition of the Bard building in downtown Baltimore City by $2 million to reflect the actual cost of the construction contract. The Board of Public Works approved a contract for this project in August of 2023 based on the actual cost of that construction contract. DLS projects that the funding could be reduced by $2 million and still leave sufficient funds to complete the project. Turning to the fiscal 2025 funded project discussions, the deferred maintenance program discussion begins on pages 4 and 5 of the analysis. There are $4 million included in the budget. Fiscal 2025 marks the 4th year of funding for this program, including fiscal 2025 funding. A total of $26.7 million will have been allocated in state funds over the previous 4-year period. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows the various categories of deferred maintenance projects that state capital funding has supported between fiscal 2022 and 2024. There's one item on the bottom of page 4 of the analysis that I would point out. DLS is asking the Department of Budget and Management to comment on the current status and anticipated timeline of the release of previously authorized PAYGO funds to BCCC. Approximately $9 million in PAYGO general and special funds were previously authorized in fiscal 2023 and 2024. However, these funds have not yet been distributed to the college and remain unencumbered. So DLS is asking DBM to comment on the status of those funds. Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows the detail included in the governor's CIP on the projects that are planned for fiscal 2025 deferred maintenance spending. There's also a note on page 6 that there is additional funding available through the Maryland Higher Education Commission Facilities Renewal Grant Program to BCCC through the college's awarded funding in fiscal 2025. The second project funded in fiscal 2025, the nursing building renovation and addition. There's $1.3 million in GO bond funding to support the beginning of the design of that project. The project would include a full building renovation and constructing additions to the building, as well as building new and modernized classroom spaces to meet the needs of the college's nursing curriculum. Lastly, on page 8, under the summary of out-year projects, I would note the first project, the Learning Commons renovation and addition project, received approximately $3.4 million in previous funding in fiscal 2023 and 2024 for design. However, due to delays in awarding a design contract, construction funding that was originally estimated for fiscal 2025 has now been deferred to fiscal 2026, representing a one-year delay from last year's CIP. There are 2 other projects in the out years of the CIP planned. These include the construction of a new facilities building and the demolition of the North Pavilion. Both would receive initial funding in fiscal 2027. That concludes the presentation on BCCC, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Quist. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Mr. Quist on Baltimore City Community College? This afternoon, we have joining us Dr. Deborah L. McCurdy, President. Thank you very much for being here, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Chang, members of the subcommittee. For the record, I am Deborah McCurdy, President, Baltimore City Community College. I'm joined by Mr. Michael Thomas, VP for Workforce Development, Con Ed, and overseeing our facilities operations, Mr. Aubrey Bascom, VP for Business and Finance, and Mr. Michael Ratting, our CIO. Also, let me thank our DLS analyst, Sam Quest, and certainly his thorough analysis as well. We do thank you for this opportunity to provide brief testimony in support of Governor's 2025 capital budget recommendations for Baltimore City Community College. This demonstrates Maryland's commitment to Baltimore City Community College and our students as well. We know we've seen an uptick in our student enrollment. So the past fall, we've seen an 11% increase. Winter term enrollment was up to 27% in spring. This spring, 22%. And so we are pleased to continue to be on the move with our students as well as our facilities. What we do know is that previous decades have passed without adequate investment in the college facilities. We are now, I think, in full collaboration with DGS and awarding critical maintenance projects to the college as well over the past 3 years. Some of this is in our testimony. Some $22 million has been invested over about 27 individual projects. Critical infrastructure is vital to the college. You have the report. We can demonstrate so much deferred maintenance that has not occurred in a 20-year period. So we're just now beginning to see some of the facility projects catch up. Some of these affect the quality of life for our faculty, our staff, and our students when we're talking about HVAC systems, hot water replacements, elevators that continue to fail, water fountains that don't fail. These are very common everyday occurrences at the institution. We have ongoing projects that are going well with our new security kiosks, repairs to the gym, fine arts restroom renovations, cooling towers that are going up. And again, just about every elevator with the exception in the new wing either needs repair or replacement. These are long overdue, over 20 years. Our major capital projects, you've heard some, our Learning Commons, which is our library. That's a 1965 facility, is now scheduled for renovation as well as an expansion. Our nursing building will be moving along in the next couple of years with the design funds and further funding in subsequent years as well. That's a 1977 building. Both of these facilities have had very little deferred maintenance over the years. And right now we're still, even with the funding that's coming, we're still replacing HVACs and chiller systems in order to maintain the instruction in these buildings. As far as our DLS recommendations, Baltimore City College, we concur with the recommended actions to adopt the governor's budget for the $4 million deferred maintenance and the 1.289 for the design of the nursing building renovation in addition. The nursing project will provide certainly modern hospital environment and simulation for our students but at the current time, the building continues to experience some system failures. We've included as well DBM's response regarding the release of previously authorized PAYGO funding in our written testimony, and will continue to encumber available deferred maintenance funds to complete our numerous projects. I'd like to thank certainly this body for approving the use of the construction contingency funding for the Loop Road improvement on the campus. It's a project that, again, was decades old. That project is now complete. The additional funds to address unsuitable soil conditions and the location of the new road certainly has helped this project, and we are now enjoying improved circulation. One more project as well, to thank you for the support of the Bard Building demolition project. That is scheduled for completion downtown Baltimore in July 2024. And the next step for the Bard Building project is for us to reimagine the redevelopment of the site with the Center for Innovation. We have already begun some preliminary plans for a Center for Innovation to host many of our academic programs and new programming as well. So I thank you, Chairman Chang, Vice Chair, committee members. If there are questions, we are certainly prepared to respond. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam President. We have a question from Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the total enrollment at the college?
The enrollment for the fall fluctuates from fall to winter to spring. Our current enrollment is, I believe it's about 3,700 students, which is a 22% increase over the previous years. So like other institutions, we saw the enrollment drop over COVID, but we're now enjoying the steady increase in students.
And I noticed the nursing program. Out of those, how many is in your nursing program?
I believe there are, I don't have an exact number on the nursing program, but with the addition, we're looking at increasing by about 40 to 50%. We can do a great deal more with the addition.
Now, is your program a 2-year or 4-year program?
It is a 2-year program that would transfer to 4-year institutions.
The next question, you mentioned the library. I know when I was working in a college, you had to have so many books for your accreditation to kind of maintain. Where are you at in your library system?
Our holdings are adequate in terms of maintaining. We'll be coming up for our Middle States accreditation, and so that will demonstrate our holdings. What is more important in the library is the aging of the facility going back to 1965, and with everything in that facility that now needs repair. Elevators that don't work, flooring. We'd be very concerned with other structural and hazardous kinds of things that go on in that facility.
I know that accreditation, the library is a very, very critical to have those volumes. So I would encourage you to maintain that library level.
Absolutely. We intend to maintain, but we do intend to enhance. So the library is scheduled for full renovation as well as a full addition as well. And so we hope in the next 3 years that you will see the fruits of the efforts coming out of this committee and others to support that. It's long overdue. 1965.
Love to visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Metzger, for the questions. Are there any other questions from members of the subcommittee? Great. Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing for the Baltimore City Community College. The committee will now turn to.
Thank you.
Welcome. Department of Health. And our budget analyst is Ms. Naomi Kimura.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Naomi Kimura. I'm the budget analyst with the Department of Legislative Services, presenting the capital budget analysis for the Department of Health. On the first page, we show the state-owned capital improvement program by project. There are 3 projects included in the fiscal 2025 CIP, but only 2 of them are requesting funding in fiscal 2025. There's a total of $16.5 million in the request, $16 million for the renovation of the north wing at the Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center, and $404,000 to demolish decommissioned buildings. On the top of the next page, we have a chart of the state-owned capital improvement program by fund source. In fiscal 2025, the entire request is made up of general obligation bonds. Further down on the page, we have a summary of the grant and loan capital programs, which includes the Federally Qualified Health Centers Grant Program and the Community Health Facilities Grant Program. The total fiscal 25 request for these grant programs is $17.9 million. Turning now to page 4, pages 4 through 7 contain a summary of the state-owned projects in fiscal 2025. The 2024 CIP includes $16.5 million in general obligation bonds for 2 state-owned projects. The first is the renovation of the North Wing at Perkins, which would increase the capacity of the Department of Health to offer maximum security level beds. So the renovation will reduce the number of beds from 80 to 68, but again, increase their capacity to serve individuals with those needs. The fiscal 2025 capital budget includes $15.7 million to continue construction at Perkins and $400,000 for equipment costs. Compared to last year's CIP, the project scope has expanded a bit to include additional upgrades to the kitchen. This change led to a 7-month delay in the overall project timeline, but total construction costs have increased by about 20% from the 2023 CIP due to increases in the cost of materials and supplies needed to construct the dormitories. During the renovation, the Department of Health will need to temporarily relocate up to 40 patients to Springfield Hospital Center, who will then be placed back at Perkins once the renovation is complete. DLS has asked MDH to comment on how it will assure that the relocation of these patients will have as low an impact as possible on patients and additional staff workload. The second state-owned project is efforts to demolish decommissioned buildings. So this project identifies vacant buildings that are due for demolition because they are deemed unsuitable for restoration or renovation. Currently, the department has plans to demolish 2 dormitory buildings at Perkins and a dormitory at Rica, Baltimore. The total request in fiscal 2025 to demolish these structures is $404,000, and this is entirely for the demolition of the dorms at Perkins. The facility at Rica has experienced some delays because MDH is required to seek approval from the Maryland Historical Trust. They anticipate completing the demolition of the Rica dorms by spring of 2026. MDH anticipates design for the Perkins demolition to be completed by fall 2024. The 2023 CIP recommended $2.4 million to demolish these 2 projects, but again, because of this delay, the total construction cost in fiscal 25 was reduced to $1.9 million. Another change to the scope is due to MDH reprioritizing some of the demolitions. The current scope no longer includes the demolition of 2 complexes at Springfield Hospital Center. And as a result, the funding recommended in the 2024 CIP totals $3.2 million compared to $3.7 million recommended last year. Finally, the third state-owned project is the new facility for children and high-intensity residential treatment center. This project is not requesting funding until fiscal 2026. Pages 7 through 11 summarize the grant and loan programs that the Department of Health operates. Again, they operate the 2 grant programs for community health facilities and then the other to support federally qualified health centers around the state. I'll just note that the request in fiscal 25 in both of these programs also includes deficiency adjustments to avoid a potential deficiency from grants with obligated funds that are within their eligible spending period, but who have not yet encumbered all of their funds. This is due to an accounting procedure that is explained in more detail in the analysis. The 2024 CIP includes $12.6 million for 2 community health facility grant awardees and the deficit adjustment that I just mentioned. Exhibit 1 on page 9 lists out those 2 projects and the deficit adjustment. The CIP also includes $5.3 million for the federally qualified health centers grant program and the deficit adjustment. Exhibit 3 on page 11 shows those 3 projects that would receive funding, as well as the $3 million deficit adjustment. On page 12, we've included in discussion on the facilities master plan. MDH submitted a report on January 23rd, 2024, noting updates that it's made to the facility master's plan. And exhibit 4 shows the recommendations that were included in the original plan and indicates which have been updated. Notably, MDH has halted divestiture at 2 hospital centers, Deer Heads Hospital Center and Western Maryland Hospital Center. It also accelerated the timeline to build the new facility for children and paused construction of behavioral health crisis centers and the new secure evaluation and therapeutic treatment center in order to reevaluate the needs for those last 2 constructions. Regarding halting divestiture at Deer's Head and Western Maryland Hospital Centers, these 2 hospitals centers were rated poor in the facilities master plan due to the conditions of the structures. But now that MDH has halted divestiture because it is determined that those services that those facilities provide are necessary, we've asked MDH to comment on plans for facility improvements. And then lastly, we also noted in the analysis that the Department of Health is planning to request approval for a contract for emergency construction on the RICA campus in Rockville, the John L. Gildner RICA campus. In fiscal 2024, MDH has opened 12 new beds at this facility and anticipates opening 6 additional at the beginning of fiscal 2025. And so DLS has asked MDH to comment on the need for emergency funding and provide an estimated date for when the contract would be brought to the Board of Public Works. We've also asked MDH to comment on the source of funds to support this contract. So in closing, DLS recommends approving all authorizations and pre-authorizations for the Department of Health capital budget.
Thank you very much for the analysis, Ms. Kimura. Are there any questions for the subcommittee for Ms. Kimura on the analysis? Great, thank you. This afternoon, we have joining us the Secretary of Maryland Department of Health, Secretary Laura Herrera Scott. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Chang, members of the subcommittee, Laura Herrera Scott, Secretary of Health for the record. And with me is Deputy Secretary Brian Morose. Brian oversees our MDH healthcare operations, which not only includes our 11 healthcare facilities, but our Office of Facilities Management and Development. You have our formal written responses in front of you. The department wishes to thank the governor and the Department of Budget and Management for their and the Budget Committee for their support. We also certainly want to thank Naomi Kimura for her detailed budget analysis and for its recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance. And so with that, I'll be brief and just open it up for questions based on our written responses.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Any questions from the subcommittee for Secretary Herrera Scott or the agency? Great. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
We have a witness, Ms. Denise Gilmore from AFSCME, Maryland. Okay, that will end the hearing for the Maryland Department of Health. The committee will now move on to the Maryland Hospital Association, and our budget analyst is Victoria Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Victoria Martinez, and I'll be speaking about the Maryland Hospital Association analysis. As shown on the cover page, the capital budget provides 6.8 million in GO bonds for the private hospital grant program, which is administered by MHA. The planned CIP also includes 8 million each year from fiscal 2026 through 2029. Through the private hospital grant program, private hospitals can apply for capital grants for projects that improve patient care. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows the 6 projects selected for fiscal 2025 grant funding, including the total cost of the project and the percentage that is state funded. And pages 5 and 6 have a summary of each of these projects. Most of these projects address increasing behavioral and mental health concerns, and half of all projects focus on improving emergency department services to meet the increased volume and acuity of patients seeking care. The first issue provides an update on the status of projects funded through the program. Exhibit 3 on page 8 summarizes the status of the projects currently in progress. Out of a total of 34 projects in progress, 19 are in the design and or planning phase, 8 are in the construction phase, and 6 are paused or delayed. Of the 6 paused or delayed projects, there are 4 that are paused and currently being reevaluated, and Exhibit 4 summarizes these paused projects and the reasons for their delays. The projects are still within their 7-year term, and the board is continuing to assess projects to reallocate funding or change their scope. The capital budget proposes to deauthorize funding for the Luminous Health and Arundel Medical Center project because DBM determined that their proposed revised scope constituted a new project request and should be evaluated through MHA's private hospital grant program. The Department of Legislative Services is concerned about the status of the remaining 3 projects. MHA confirmed that the Atlantic General Hospital plans to move forward, and DLS asked that MHA provide an update on the status of this project, including any changes to the project's scope and an updated project timeline. Considering that the Peninsula Regional Medical Center project and the Johns Hopkins Hospital project are paused and not moving forward, DLS recommends deauthorizing funds for these 2 projects. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Marcia Martinez, for the presentation. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for our budget analyst? Great, thank you very much. This afternoon, we have from the Maryland Hospital Association, Ms. Jane Krinke, Senior Analyst, Government Affairs. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jane Krinke for the record, here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association. Just want to extend our thanks to Victoria, our analyst, for doing such a great job, and our partners at DBM. As mentioned, $6.8 million is requested for 6 projects, and there's an overwhelming need for ED renovations, especially a focus on behavioral health and youth in needs of behavioral health care. In response to the questions raised in our analysis, these projects are paused, a lot of them. So Atlantic General, we did connect with them. They are pausing their project, but they're still within that 7-year term. So they're evaluating if they can move forward, as well as the other ones that identified in the analysis. We would ask for no action to be taken yet, just to give them time within their term to evaluate as they move forward. We appreciate this committee's support of our program. Access to capital funding continues to be critical to hospitals. And with that, I thank you very much, and ask for a favorable report on to maintain our $6.8 million included in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Krinke. Are there any questions from members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee? Delegate Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I wanted to speak with you about the proposal to deauthorize funding for the Luminous Health hybrid operating room project. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So we had, in the past, we had worked with the Department of Budget and Management and DLS to make scope changes. So this is a project that they had put forward a plan before COVID, and then COVID changed everything and they aren't able to move forward anymore. So we'd requested a scope change on their behalf. That was denied by the Department of Budget and Management. Our review committee convened and decided to support the DBM's recommendation. However, sorry, not to support their recommendation to deauthorize, but to have that hospital advocate to maintain their funding. They have other ideas for how they can utilize the funding for a different project within a similar scope.
Okay, I appreciate your answer there.
Absolutely.
Okay, Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real curious, and thank you for being here today. How does the hospitals get under your purview? Do they apply to you for funding?
Yes, great question. So back so there's a bill this session to actually codify our program. It's been in use it's been in the works since 1993, I believe. So we have a very extensive process where all of our members are eligible to apply. They put forward an application that includes designs, financial information, and that happens in the summer. And then in August, they come and present. We include DBM and DLS. And then we have a review committee of hospital peers, so trustees and executives evaluate each of the projects and make a recommendation on which ones to fund. And then we work with DBM to put that into the capital budget.
Because I'm real curious, because I was in talks with GBMC and MedStar Franklin Square. And I was just curious, did they apply and not get the pick, or?
In the past, they've applied. Our program is very small. So we have a budget of $7 million right now. So it's really for very small, innovative projects that don't require a certificate of need, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so not all hospital projects that you might see in the capital budget would be a good fit for the program or score well, or they're too big.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Krinky, for being here. And that concludes the hearing for the Maryland Hospital Association. The committee will now move on to Board of Public Works, and our budget analyst is Samantha Tapia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Samantha Tapia with the Department of Legislative Services, presenting the fiscal 2025 capital budget analysis for the Department of General Services, or Board of Public Works. We do have several requests for commentary, so that I do have to set up, so a little bit more lengthy. Looking at pages 1 and 2, pages 1 and 2 provide summary graphs of funding in this 2024 CIP, which includes 6 major projects through fiscal 2029. There's a total of 21.5 million in the budget for fiscal 2025 that increases in the total budget each year to fund more concurrent projects. The 21.5 million in fiscal 2025 includes 5 million in PAYGO for state center demolition plans and 16.5 million in GO bonds for Schaefer Tower renovation. Out-year funding is planned for the Education Building in 2026, Treasury and Wineland in 2027, and Central Services in 2029. Notable changes from the previous year include the fact that final year funding for State House renovations is or was in fiscal 2024, removal of 2100 Guilford Avenue renovations, while DGS develops new plans for its headquarters relocation, removal of the Annapolis data center renovations to prioritize other projects. And we also see increased costs and a shifting up of the schedule of work on Schaefer Tower renovations. Looking at statewide and regional programs in fiscal 2025, brief overview. On page 2, all funding from fiscal 2024 forward is scheduled in GO bonds. Funding for fuel tank replacement continues at 1 million. The construction contingency fund receives a further 2.5 million, and facilities renewal does not receive new funding, while the fiscal 2023 appropriation of 110 million is expected to last through most of fiscal 2025. Then looking a little bit closer at specific projects, State Center on page 5, also discussed on the operating side, most agencies in the State Center complex are scheduled to move during calendar 2024. The Department of Health will remain there through most of calendar 2025, and new locations are still being determined for DGS and 2 smaller offices. The 2024 CIP includes 5 million in PAYGO for the planning of demolition and the transfer of the property. And in calendar 2022, at the December 21st Board of Public Works meeting, $500,000 in general funds was approved for a grant to the Baltimore City Department of Planning to support state center redevelopment planning. We've asked for commentary from DGS on the progress it has made on these plans with Baltimore City Department of Planning in general and supported by this particular grant. While other funding in the DPA for moving expenses will be tracked on the operating side, decisions and activity related to the state center property itself are of interest on the capital side, especially anticipating that the state will be interested in supporting redevelopment even while the property is owned by Baltimore City. In order for the committees to be informed in more detail beyond the brief summary in a future CIP, we've recommended adding language restricting use of the $5 million in PAYGO for demolition planning pending a report on a plan for use of the funds and transfer of the property. And looking at Guilford Avenue on page 8, the 2100 Guilford Avenue property in Baltimore City was originally selected as a new location for the DGS headquarters. Last year's CIP included $6.7 million in fiscal 2025 for continued work on the site. At the same time, project costs have been increasing and concerns about construction and traffic congestion continued to be raised by the surrounding community. Citing these reasons, DGS reported in January 2024 that it had decided not to move forward with relocation to this property, but would continue to maintain and secure the property while alternative plans are developed. To help the legislature and the public continue to track these decisions, we've recommended adopting committee narrative requesting report in December of this calendar year, updating the committees on the status of DGS relocation plans and identified uses of the 2100 Guilford Avenue property. Lastly, for specific renovation projects, Wineland Building on page 7, while funding for Wineland Building renovation in the 2024 CIP is not planned until fiscal 2027, the fiscal 2022 budget included $2 million in PAYGO general funds for renovations. DGS reported in August 2023 that this funding was still being used for renovations on the property and that this work would be completed in fiscal 2024. So we've asked DGS to comment on the status of these renovations. Moving to statewide and regional programs, facilities renewal, starting on page 10. The backlog of projects as of January 2024 stood at approximately $233.8 million, a modest increase of 4.3% from the previous year. The fiscal 2024 and 2025 budgets did and do not include new funding for facilities renewal after a total of $110 million in PAYGO general funds was appropriated for fiscal 2023 and intended to last into a third year. The rate of funding use has been approximately $5.4 million per month, and the balance of this funding in February 2024 was $65 million. Then at the same rate of use, this funding is expected to last into the spring of 2025, providing time to consider a deficiency appropriation for fiscal 2025 in the fiscal 2026 budget bill. There have been past concerns about staffing and operational efficiency, both here and in the operating side counterpart of critical maintenance. DGS indicated in December 2023 that it was exploring new software to improve project management and record keeping. So we've asked DGS to comment on how this new software may improve record keeping of the backlog and to comment on the overall facilities renewal and maintenance program, indicating greatest needs and discussing new activities or agenda changes intended to address those needs. And looking at the construction contingency fund on page 12, exhibit 3 on page 12, funding did decrease back to the pre-fiscal 2023 level of $2.5 million after funding was increased significantly in fiscal 2023 and 2024. However, we can see in Exhibit 4 on page 13 that the ending balance of the fund has been increasing each year and is estimated to stand close to $15 million at the end of fiscal 2024. This is while spending in each year since and including fiscal 2020 has not exceeded $5 million except for in fiscal 2023 when use did not exceed $10 million. Now looking at the fuel storage tank replacement program on page 14. This program provides funding to remove, replace, or upgrade state-owned fuel storage tanks, and this is primarily at state police barracks. These fuel tanks age or may be damaged, and the leaking of fuel can lead to soil and groundwater contamination. $1 million has been the standard set aside for this program for a number of years, but DGS has indicated that more funding would allow the agency to work through the queue of tank replacements more quickly. We've asked DGS to comment on the urgency of tank replacements and on whether additional funding should be considered for the program. We've also asked DGS to comment on the status of tank replacements currently underway and on project prioritization in fiscal 2025. DGS also noted that there is a national grant program called the Leaking Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund that may be sought for federal aid for this program. So we've asked DGS to comment on whether it has applied for a grant through this program or has the intention to do so. In summary, we concur with all the GO bond authorizations and pre-authorizations, but recommend committee narrative requesting the status update on DGS relocation and use of the 2100 Guilford Avenue property. And for PAYGO, we recommend restricting use of the $5 million for State Center demolition until a detailed plan for use of the funds is shared with the budget committees. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions or turn to agency testimony. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Tapia, for the analysis. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Ms. Tapia on the analysis? This afternoon, we have joining us Executive Secretary John Gotram and also Secretary Chowdhury with the Department of General Services. So thank you for being here, and please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Chang and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here before you today and present our 2025 capital budget request for the Board of Public Works and Department of General Services. For the record, I am Chief Chowdhury, Secretary of the Maryland Department of General Services. To my right here is Assistant Secretary Courtney League of the Office of Design, Construction, and Energy. To my left here is Nelson Reichert, Deputy Secretary for the department. I want to thank you and for your consideration and support of this budget. I also would like to thank Samantha Tapia from DLS for her analysis and her hard work and understanding of our complex agency. DGS has a key role in supporting the capital needs of many agencies across the state. When it comes to the PAYGO recommended actions, DGS concurs with the recommended actions, eliminating the $5 million until the department submits a report to the budget committees detailing how the funds be utilized. When it comes to GO bond recommended actions, there's two. We concur with all authorizations and pre-authorizations. And when it comes to adopting committee narrative regarding the department should report on the status of our own relocation as well as status and use of the 2100 Guilford Avenue property, DGS also concurs with this recommendation. We've been prepared to brief the committee on 6 discussion points. You have our written responses before you, and being respectful of the committee's time, we are happy to provide an overview of our responses at the discretion of the chair. Otherwise, we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Very much appreciated. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Secretary Chowdhury or the panel? Great. Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing for the Board of Public Works. And that concludes today's Capital Budget Subcommittee hearing. Have a great evening. Thanks.